what it's like to be part of Cape Town, you should go look for that song, Welcome to Cape Town. It's got a nice jive to it. So this is my role today, is to welcome you to the 4th World Small Scale Fisheries Congress. And welcome to Cape Town, welcome to South Africa, welcome to Africa. Although, let's not be fooled, this is not Africa when you look outside Cape Town. Cape Town is one of the most unequal cities in the world. And it would also be, I would urge you to also look at the inequalities that are in and around us. UWC, the University of Western Cape, was a place where we decided over 10 years ago, that small-scale fisheries is too big to be ignored. And that's where we coined the name. We also used the big 5 in terms of big questions that we wanted to ask. And the big question was, we needed to defend the beach. We needed to recognize this group. We needed to recognize their food security. And 10 years down the line, we are here back in Cape Town to kind of revisit what we've done. It is an academic conference, but it's an academic conference with a difference. It's an academic conference that welcomes all fisher people that are here, and I welcome you. It is a World Fisher Day today, and this is our base. This is where we started. This is important for you, and this is why we're here. So we don't want to talk for you or about you. We want to talk with you, and this is a key theme of the Congress. I want to say that small-scale fisheries is not as significant in South Africa, but it is very significant on the continent. It takes 90% of the continent. Small-scale fisheries come from small-scale. And remember, we have the vast coastline of Africa, but we also have inland fisheries, big lakes, riverine fisheries that provide the food security. Therein, the role of women is often overlooked, invisible, and it is important that we make this Congress an important part of how women is featuring in the next decade of the ocean. So it is also the year of the artisanal fishers, and you will hear that quite a bit today. This is not about me, but I also want to say that the coast of Africa is about trade, it's about science, but it's also about slavery. There was slavery to Cape Town, but also slavery from the coast outside to other parts of the world. So our coast also have a lot of our ancestors are part of that. So remember 1652, 1820, and 1896 was the first explorer in terms of marine science around the coast of South Africa. Little bit of history just to welcome you, but our first speaker, I want to welcome our first speaker. That would be Sue Middleton, and she is currently the Deputy Director General of Branch Fisheries, also part of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. And Sue has an interesting history. Sue has moved from the land. She has a master's in sociology from Rhodes University. And she started in the Department of Land Affairs before she came to the ocean. So Sue's journey comes from the land to the... So welcome, Sue, to open us to the Congress. Thank you.
Program Director, Professor Maniba Isaacs, distinguished guests in the venue and on the virtual platform, small-scale fishers joining us here and from all over the world. I greet you this morning, Monday, the 21st of November, 2022, which, as Maniba has said, is World Fisheries Day. So this is a very auspicious day and date indeed. As Maniba has said, my name is Sue Middleton. I'm the Deputy Director General responsible for fisheries in the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment of the South African Government. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this beautiful country and to Cape Town, which, as Maniba has said, is not without its challenges, and it has a long checkered history. It is indeed an honor for South Africa to be chosen as one of the 5 sites to host this Congress under the theme Leading by Example. Thanks to Professor Isaacs and her team for doing great work in bringing this important Congress here, and for all the preparations and logistics that went into pulling this event together. I would like to extend a special welcome to our most important guests, small-scale fishers, and the various community-based organizations present here today and on the virtual platform. I would also like to welcome delegates from the region and the continent and those from across the world who've made time to be with us here in person and virtually. We are excited to have you all here to observe and participate in the 4th World Small-Scale Fisheries Congress. This Congress marks an important milestone in recognizing the importance of and celebrating small-scale fishers globally. This fourth World Small-Scale Fisheries Congress coincides with the International Year for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, declared by the United Nations to recognize the contributions of small-scale fisheries and aquaculture to livelihoods, food and nutritional security, emphasizing the necessity for everyone to take action to support this important sector. South Africa is looking forward to engagements and the resolutions that will come out of this event, as South Africa itself is poised to charter a course that will assist in propelling small-scale fisheries forward. In saying this, I am confident that through continued collaboration in highlighting and recognizing the contribution of small-scale fisheries to food security, protection of livelihoods, and its contribution to the broader 2030 development agenda, specifically and especially SDG 14, that small-scale fisheries will continue to have their voices heard and their contribution to the well-being of humankind and the environment around us recognized and supported. I wish to thank the organizers, singling out the University of the Western Cape, Too Big to Ignore, the African Development Bank, SADC, and WWF, and other partners. And I would specifically like to single out the contribution of 2 women who have given their lives to supporting small-scale fisheries. And those are Professor Ratanga Chiangpagdi and Professor Maniba Isaacs. Distinguished guests, in these few words, I would like to welcome you, each and every one of you, and I wish you the best in this 4th World Small-Scale Fisheries Congress. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, for your kind words. We quickly have to move on because we have now, this is the the time we do the hybrid. And often with technology, we get it right, and often not. So I'm going to quickly move to this is now my boss, the UWC, University of Western Cape Rector, Professor Tyrone Pretorius, who will join us online to say a few words of welcoming all our guests to South Africa, and more particularly from perspectives of UWC. Our rector is a quiet and deep thinker with 2 PhDs. As I would introduce him. I hope he is online and able to go ahead. Thank you. Rector, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Isaac. Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Thank you. May I add an acknowledgement of all our key partners, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, too big to ignore, Global Masikundisi Development Trust, the African Development Bank, the Southern African Development Community, the Oak Foundation, World Wildlife Fund, Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership. Partnerships is the key in the world that we're living in, and we at the University of the Western Cape appreciate these partnerships. Good morning, all delegates. I am sorry that I cannot be with you in person, but I have a day full of meetings ahead of me. I would like to start by expressing my appreciation to my colleagues in the program for Land and Agrarian Studies for everything that they've done in making sure that this conference takes place. It is with great pleasure that I, on behalf of the University of the Western Cape, welcome you all to the 4th World Small Scale African Fisheries Congress. I also welcome you to Cape Town, which, as Muniba has indicated, is a city of 2 worlds, the rich and the poor. But it is also a city that is rich with a history of small-scale fisheries, and where many of us in South Africa grew up with the sound of a horn announcing the fish sellers in their neighborhood. It therefore made sense that our university has forged strong connections through research and advocacy with fishing communities in the Western Cape through the work of the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. This research institute has been essential to our commitment to community engagement and the struggle for a just society. This is clearly evident in the book Beyond the Blue by Professor Muniba Isaacs, which was launched yesterday. It is the culmination of many years of research and engagement with women participating in small-scale fishing. However, like many other individually run and owned small businesses in South Africa, this sector has had to fight for a space of recognition and survival. It continues to do so, even though there are policies that grant them protection and rights to operate. The recent COVID-19 pandemic is an example of the obstacles and the struggles that this community faced. During the hard lockdown in South Africa, small-scale fishers could not take their boats out to sea, decimating their livelihoods. When they were eventually declared essential service providers, they were still restricted from operating because they were forbidden to travel at night. And this meant that they could not travel to sea early in the morning to launch their boats. This is one significant example of how small communities or industries fall through bureaucratic black holes. There have also been instances when small-scale fisheries have been cast as the poachers and illegal fishers. Yet, they speak to an interaction with the ocean that has sustained livelihoods and shaped a culture of resilience and solidarity among the members of particular communities and with neighbors. This Congress then comes at an opportune time so that we might learn from you, not only as a university, but also as a country and as a continent. With its theme of leading by example, leadership for sustainable small-scale fisheries, that recognizes the many successes and gains that has been made, it is clear that there has been some progress for small-scale fisheries around the world, but still a lot has to be done. I'm sure that this Congress will be fertile ground for further collaboration and action that will serve and support small-scale fisheries in the future. And I'm sure that my colleagues in the program for land and agrarian studies is eager to forge more and exciting partnerships. I wish you as the participants, the conveners, and all partners and supporters a fruitful and productive Congress. Make the most of your time in the Congress and make the most of your time in Cape Town. I thank you and wish you well.
Thank you very much, Rector. I also know that you have a meeting. It is South Africa's academic year starts in January and it ends in November. So there's a lot of academic meetings that he has to attend. And I thank you for your time to be part of this meeting. We are now quickly moving over to the next speaker, Isha Online. Our next speaker, a short introduction, is Leila Farah Muqaddam, and she's the Director General of the Southern African region as part of the African Development Bank. She has 25 years of bank experience, stretching from IFM, and is currently based in Pretoria, and she manages over $3 billion US dollars, indicative of a operational portfolio in the Southern African region. Leila, you are welcome and looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you very much. In fact, the portfolio is 13 billion. Thank you very much, honorable members of the government of South Africa, DG and Deputy DG, Department of Fisheries, Professor Pretorius, University of Western Cape, partners to this event, representatives of the diplomatic corps, development partners, private sector, and civil society, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this opening plenary to the 4th World Small Scale Fisheries Congress. It is a pleasure and honor for the African Development Bank to partner with Too Big to Ignore Fisheries Network through Memorial University to have the first African presence of this gathering in beautiful Cape Town. As you all know, fisheries are an important aspect of the blue economy as it provides us with aquatic foods and agri-commodities that contribute to all 4 goals of the bank's Feed Africa strategy and other high fives, including Integrate Africa, Industrialize Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. Towards Feed Africa strategy, fisheries contribute to competitive value chains that provide jobs and livelihoods, to eradicate extreme poverty, especially in rural areas, provision of nutrient-rich diets towards malnutrition, and the malnourished, contribution to export earnings, and a vibrant socio-economic sector in many rural, coastal, riparian, and island countries. Fisheries is important not only to the continent, but to the world, as it is one of the most traded agro-commodity that requires effective governance. Fish stock migrates beyond boundaries, within transboundary lakes, across rivers and the various oceans, here in South Africa, both on the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. About 3 billion people rely on global supply chains for this aquatic sourced food, contributing to $300 billion a year to global GDP. For the African continent and our regional member countries, small-scale fisheries provide an opportunity for development along the food livelihood trade nexus and in increasing productivity and competitiveness in meeting the Feed Africa goals. Ladies and gentlemen, this past week, a team from the African Development Bank traversed across the shores of Lake Malawi, speaking with fisher folks, women processors and traders, youth, community leaders, and district councillors. They heard how the bank financed project on small-scale fisheries and aquaculture is transforming lives. Mrs. Kanda, the chair of the Mundundu, a fish of dairy cooperative, shared with the team how the lives of the members of the cooperative have been made better. Household income and savings have increased. Children are better nourished at home. Standards of living have improved through better housing conditions. This story highlights the importance of small-scale fisheries on aquaculture, indeed changes that are transforming lives and that are too big to ignore. Currently, we have mainstreamed fisheries and the blue economy in our various country strategy papers, and we are preparing investment projects and pipeline operations in many of our Southern African countries, including Angola, Sao Tome and Principe, Madagascar, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mauritius, Madagascar, Mozambique, and Lesotho. In fact, to support our regional integration strategy for Southern Africa, the bank financed last year a $10 million grant towards a regional public goods project from our concessional window, the ADF 15, to promote fisheries governance and blue economy trade corridors in support of SADC aspirations. Supporting robust fisheries production system is imperative to mark this year's African Union Year of Nutrition 2022, and to ensure multiple goals are met in the transformation of food systems in the context of the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. We would work with other multilateral development banks and development partners such as FAO, WWF, and World Fish to ensure we deliver on our common objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, so today we are happy to welcome you on behalf of the bank and to look forward to fruitful discussions. We stand together to support our regional member countries with technical assistance, investment projects, and resource mobilization to support small-scale fisheries and to ensure they are too big to ignore. We wish you an excellent Congress and fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leila, for your kind introduction to the conference. And yes, small-scale fisheries is too big to ignore. It is a great honor for me to invite our next speaker. He may not know this, but I have been stalking him for years. His name is Judge Nathan Erasmus, and he is the High Court judge that sat on the significant judgment for small-scale fisheries. The court case, Kenneth George and others, was a big case for small-scale fisheries. And this case was tabled in the Equality Court for South African fishers. I hope you are all here to challenge your right to livelihood, your right to food security, and also your right to dignity. So Judge Nathan Erasmus sat on this case, and I wondered what went through his mind when he deliberated on that case. Judge Nathan Erasmus, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Isaacs, Program Director, distinguished guests, colleagues, some of you I may know or from my previous life that I haven't seen this morning. So I may say comrades, some of you. DDG, you on the other side of the George case. I shall deal with it briefly. I prepared a long academic paper, Prof, during the course of last week because I was told I have to speak about human rights. That's a legal concept for some people. Today, I've changed it and I'm going to speak about fishing rights as a human right. And I have not spoken to Professor Pretorius about his speech, or to Prof. Isaacs about hers, or to the DDG about what they said, but coincidentally I wrote a lot of things that touch on that. So I'm humbled and honored to address a group like this on an occasion like this, because we often forget, sitting in the higher offices, of what's happening on the ground. I've been asked to share a few ideas in the context of fishing rights as a human right. And I suspect that Prof. Isaacs approached me as a result of the judgment in the George matter, which was cited as George versus the Minister of Environmental Affairs and Tourism, which is the predecessor of the DG's department. Now, we were in a university council meeting a few months ago, and she slipped me a piece of paper saying she wants to talk to me about this case. And I saw the name, didn't ring a bell, because we lose touch. Sitting in the High Court, you write a judgment, you forget about it. The name, Kenneth George, doesn't ring a bell, but he represented a significant part of our community, and I shouldn't have forgotten it. That judgment was handed down. I drew the law reports because in those days we didn't have electronic reports. I handed the judgment down on the 24th of August, 2005. Now let me explain a little bit about the legal framework within which that judgment turned out to be case number 1 of 2005. And you would have noted it started in April. So no way it would have had a case number of 1. But it was because, and I'm not sure whether the role players are here, some of them, the NGO that represented these small-scale fishers, they decided to have a two-pronged approach. They filed in the Equality Court as well as in the High Court. And the Equality Court has concurrent jurisdiction with the normal High Court, which in this province used to be called the Supreme Court for the Western Cape. We changed the names, and it's a provincial division with different local divisions. And Equality Court judges can only sit in the Equality Court once you are certified to be an Equality Court judge. The Equality Courts came about because, in terms of our Constitution, in Chapter 9 thereof, Parliament must pass legislation to promote the values in our Constitution. And therefore, in the first paragraph of the judgment, I said, equality is a core value underpinning South Africa's constitutional democracy, and consequently, the role of the right to equality in our new dispensation cannot be overstated. I took my inspiration for writing that from the preamble to our Constitution. I have it in the paper, but I'm not going to necessarily read it out to you because I only have 10 minutes. When you look at the preamble to our Constitution in South Africa, it reminds me that one should never ignore our rear view mirror image, where we come from and where we want to go. The first value under the values in our Constitution is indeed, and I quote, human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms, close quote. Prof. Isaacs, I've not been informed whether the choice of this venue was intentional. As firstly, it is situated, as most of you might have observed, in the most beautiful bay in our country. Hence, you want to welcome everyone to Cape Town. But at least you reminded us of the disparities that exist. And that's our rear view mirror image. When we look at the bay, we look back at the land on which we stand. I'm firstly reminded that this ocean is ours, and I'm not only referring to South Africans. Where we are right now is, however, an interesting place for other reasons on which we should ponder the enduring importance of the sea to our own national and international imagination. Here we are at a beach on Table Bay, not too far as the crow flies from where that supposed founding moment that Prof. Isaacs referred to in our history took place in 1652, where supposedly South Africa's original sin took place, where Jan van Riebeeck, on 3 little wooden boats, apparently took this country through his establishment of a refreshment station. Ironically, a site of sustenance for the VOC, fed by the streams running from Table Mountain into the sea. Not too far from here, to your right, as you sit, is the mouth of the Salt River. In 1510, well before Jan van Riebeck's arrival, the indigenous people of this country fought off the Portuguese when they decided to steal our cattle. It is said that they were chased back into the sea because the Portuguese believed what was owned could not be shared. This is similar to what happened in another fishing village down the coast in 1488 with the landing of Vasco da Gama. And not too dissimilar from the ongoing debates about developments on that very same river. And the heritage of the areas and the damage it will done to the sustainability of the ocean. We can also talk, Prof. Isaacs, you referred to it, about the thousands of enslaved bodies brought here to work the land, and they came by sea. And the countless others who died either here or en route in this very bay. The São José, a Portuguese slave ship that sunk in 1794, close to here, across the bay, at a place called Clifton. So that is, to my view, a lingering trace of the history that connects this place through the sea to the world. It seems to me that wherever there is water in South Africa, there's an encounter, a meeting of two worlds, of people, cultures, and those who have, and those who have not, and those who have that want to take. Our history, that's our rearview mirror, often tells us that these encounters are violent and at the expense of local people. But that is not always the case. Because when Jan van Riebeck arrived here, it was already known by word of mouth of the existing sustenance of this area and the existing trading post that was at the mouth of the Camisa River in Table Bay, where commodities were shared, including products from the sea by local fishermen. The descendants of those slaves I spoke of are now part of the fishermen in this bay and on the other side in False Bay, living off the sustenance of the sea. I'm not sure whether there are any persons here from the Houston community. But I was always reminded by an old friend of mine, because he travels around with a copy of a court case whenever he would used to visit us at the advocates' chambers, that many years ago, he was convicted in a court of law because his little rowing boat, the bakkie, had strayed across the imaginary line. And on appeal, he was represented by one of the great lawyers of our time in the city, Benny Kies, who eventually, later on, defending the fisher community, died in the court in Hermanus, where he was fighting for the rights of the local fishermen. There's no need for me to remind you of all the fundamental rights that's both enshrined in our domestic constitution, but also guaranteed by various international instruments. One can only but think, to a limited extent, the right to food, and that to housing, because you need to be earning an income to afford a house. The right to certain practices, and the right to a sustainable environment, freedom of your occupation, and importantly, your right to dignity. Governments and society is to ensure that all these rights must be respected and advanced. I again want to remind you of the importance of this place, this site. I took you to the river on the southern side, to your right. To the left, the northern side, we have the mouth of the Milnerton Lagoon. Once, there was an abundance of fish. Now, it is so polluted and unsafe for both the waterborne creatures as well as humans. On the other side, a few hundred meters from here, is the mouth of the Camisa, as I've referred to. Upstream from this mouth is the convergence of two rivers, which it's now become a contested site for the development of a multi-billion international company's head offices. It's been challenged on other grounds, but one looks at the protection of the environment. This was the front page of yesterday's Sunday national newspaper. Beaches fail poo tests. It's the pollution that affects the rights of small-scale fisher people. Both of these entrances to the sea can no longer serve their purpose. And it impacts, in my view, directly on the human rights of a fishing community. I have a disclosure to make. I am a recreational fisherman. It's my first passion now that I cannot play golf anymore. But one is amazed about the bureaucratic barriers that are placed in the way of people that have to fish for their own sustenance. For the last 2 years, I've spent the majority of my working time in the Southern Cape. And more often than not, I would observe how people's fishing utensils being confiscated.
Keeping back on.
Can everybody hear me? It might be There must be a balance to be struck. And that was the genesis of the George matter, as to how do you deal with small-scale fishermen and the bureaucratic systems. Speaking of that, I had the privilege of growing up in a township. In other words, a poor sub-economic area, where it was not uncommon to hear the fisherman's horn, often blown through a goat's horn, where the people were on an animal-drawn cart, and the distinctive declaration of what the wares were that were available in the fruits of the sea. I wonder how many of those are still around. Because nowadays I travel on a particular road where I used to encounter a little utility vehicle with the snook on the back being sold on the side of the road. And suddenly a big sign goes up, no hawking in this place. These are challenges that might affect the rights of small-scale fishers and the value chain from there on. I wonder whether the bureaucratic restrictions that are being placed does not play a bigger role than what we know on the illegal poaching industry. I know, Prof, you wrote about it in the past. But these are issues that we have to balance, and not saying any right is absolute, but we need to have our vision clear. In your deliberations for the next few days, I've noticed you will engage in a number of topics, a number of important topics. I take it will both be on an intellectual level, as well as often on an emotional level, because it is a form of activism. I thought at the outset I would steer away from explaining the law to you. There's no need for that. But probably through this little presentation, to remind you to monitor those rearview mirrors, and to remember in these deliberations that the context of the topic and the purpose of the protections granted to you as basic human rights of all the participants, that these must be considered carefully and in a balanced way. With this and with these few words, Prof, I wish you well in your deliberations, and may you have an enjoyable week here in our beautiful city, Cape Town. I was trying to play the song, but you can play that tonight at the dinner.
What song is this?
The Welcome to Cape Town. I've Googled it, it's available.
Thank you very much. I have to say that the Kenneth George and others' judgment was also fed into the small-scale fisheries guidelines. The right to food, these are voluntary guidelines. The right to food was also part of that, and also the 10-year guidelines, the governance for land, fisheries, forestry, and gender. So you might forget what you deliberated on at the time, but we didn't forget the judgment and how significant that was. I also want to say that that judgment was also significant in starting this whole process of thinking about blue justice, because it is the social and economic injustices that small-scale fisheries faced here in South Africa that started me thinking about what is the justice for them in terms of the blue economy. The minute they start with ending off the fight in terms of the fisheries department, the oil and gas and others are coming. So small-scale fishers' space are threatened. Thank you very much for your contribution. I think it is a very valuable start to our conference. I'm handing over, because we are running out a bit out of time, I'm handing over to my big sister, Ratana. Thank you.
Feel free to, well, you sit there, that's fine. Thank you. Sorry, we're really running out of time, but we still have a few things to go through, so just please bear with us. Normally, we would have what we call passing the torch situation, ceremony, if you like, just because we are doing this conference. This is the 5th one, if you know. If you like to put my slide, then we can do this, okay? So actually, we're not going to do the video recording, but we're just going to have one of our committee members from the Latin American Congress to come and offer the gift of the token appreciation for our next host. So Milena was part of the LAC Congress, and then she'll say a few words and then hand it over the gift.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I am Milena, and I was, as Ratana explained, in the last conference in Mexico, representing the Latin American and Caribbean region. And it's my pleasure today to bring this little present from Mexico, from the conference there, to pass it to Moniba. This Moniba. And a big message from all the American colleagues from you to wish you a successful conference as we had it there. The message there was stronger together. So just pass this message to all of you to wish you from all of them again a successful conference and enjoy it as much as we enjoy it. And good luck. Thank you.
Okay, so many of you have heard about the Too Big to Ignore, and that is basically the global research network that's been hosting this conference. So we would like to invite our most important member, who is a founding member of TBTI, to come and offer some greeting. This is happened to be the 10th years anniversary of Too Big to Ignore as well. So Professor Sven Jenthoff.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, dear all. I'm here to say a little bit about TBTI, who we are and what we do. And I also want to use this occasion to pay tribute to one of our important African members who passed away this year. For those of us who were here 10 years ago to create TBTI, the Global Research Network, this is not just another conference, it's also a celebration. When we met here all those years ago, as Moniba said, we did not know whether TBTI would materialize. But we did have the conviction that there was a need for such a network. But I don't think anyone of us imagined then what we would achieve. At least I did not. At that time, small-scale fisheries were not receiving the respect they deserved. They did not receive much attention from policymakers, of civil society, and indeed from the academic community. That was our concern. We believe that a small-scale fisheries network and that small-scale fisheries in general were not only too big to ignore, but it was also too big to fail and too important to fail, and that the academic community had a contribution to make to avoid such a thing. We also believed that there was a potential for synergy creation. A research network like TBTI could help to build a fruitful collaboration between the small-scale fisheries sector, the policy community, community-based organization, civil society organizations, and the academia. We also knew that FAO shared this view, and that TBTI could be part of the ongoing effort to develop and implement the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries. We therefore have had a close relationship with FAO on the guidelines from the very beginning. You have seen the short video of what TBTI is, and you can find more information about us on the website. You can, of course, subscribe for our newsletter. Our work is in progress. Small-scale fisheries is a dynamic sector, and the challenge of securing their sustainability and the well-being of their people will never go away in a world that is changing around them. There will always be a need for something like TBTI. We should not just be happy that TBTI is still alive after 10 years, but also for what we have become and proud of what we have achieved. Our membership, as you can see, is large and extensive, and the institutional support suggests that there is belief in our mission. We have produced a whole library of books, journal papers, videos, policy briefs. We have been part of numerous conferences, many of which we have organized ourselves, like this one. We have created an extensive database, conducted numerous case studies globally, and we have held courses, training courses around the world, and one of the last ones was here in Cape Town, just before the COVID set in, and I believe some of you who are here was also there. The world, and I think this is important because it makes it harder for anyone who wants to excuse their inaction on lack of information. It is more difficult to do so. The small-scale fisheries is rich and diverse, but we know much more about it now than we did 10 years ago. Fisheries management must fit the circumstances that exist locally. But many issues are universal. For instance, the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries, especially now with climate change. The SSF guidelines highlight governance principles that have a strong emphasis on human rights and dignity, which the previous speaker talked about, and social justice, including gender equality. These are concepts that need clarification, in a small-scale fisheries context, like we have tried to do with our most recent book on the concept of blue justice. Small-scale fisheries have become a hot research topic, more so than it was 10 years ago, and this is great. TBTI cannot claim all the credit for this. Our membership does, even if it's extensive, as you can see here, does not include all those who are engaged in this research. But I think that we have made a significant impact with our many initiatives, publications, and projects. We are fully aware, of course, that at the end of the day, this is about the millions and millions of people in Africa and around the world who draw their livelihoods and live a life in small-scale fisheries communities. The fact that we gather here today to talk about small-scale fisheries and to celebrate 10 years of TBTI gives us time to reflect on what we have learned about small-scale fisheries and how their future might be. But it's also time to remember our colleague, Paul Onyango at University of Dar es Salaam, who passed away this year. He was the TBTI coordinator for this region. He was also a great colleague and a friend to many of us. And the community has experienced a great loss by his passing away. We should here now all stand up and in 1 minute's silence pay tribute to his memory. Thank you very much.
Okay, so just a few more things to take care of. Thank you, Svein, very much for that. Okay, so we already started yesterday with the Community Day and Fishers Forum. That's part of our World Fisheries Day celebration. So again, happy World Fisheries Day, everybody. So for those who were there, of course, we had great fun with the band and the food and the book launch. So congratulations to the Women of the Sea for your new publication. The program's gonna run like this, and I'm just gonna do this very quickly, and I would remind you again what's going to happen. This is the Atlantic Suite, so good thing that you found us. These two rooms will be split into the concurrent sessions whenever you have them. The other two concurrent sessions will be in the courtyard room. I'll show you the map later. For the majority of the time, you'll be here to do these sessions with us. So every time in plenary, and also when we have the final one, which is a policy forum, so just return back here, right? So after lunch, we'll stay here. Lunch will be in the brasserie, same place. If you stay in this hotel, it's the same place you have breakfast. So lunch is for everyone, so just go there. The only thing that we're not doing very well already is to to not start on time and therefore we could not finish on time. From this point onward, we might not start on time, but we need to finish on time. So just keep that in mind if you run sessions. But it's about 3 days of spending time together in the plenary, talking about these 6 themes. So our committee members put together this program for you. So you just follow that. But keep in mind too, right, that because this is there's a lot going on in this conference, so you might want to be aware that you know you need to work within the setting that we have. It's a hybrid, so we're doing our best. This is not the most professional one because we are not paying a fortune for it. You also didn't pay a fortune to be part of this, right? So we just need to make sure that when you go into the concurrent sessions, you would need to speak in front of the laptop in the room. You are not allowed to plug in your own laptop because it's already set up with the sound system. So please don't mess around with that. Many of you have sent us the PowerPoint, but some of you have not. So you cannot just hoping that, you know, this would happen on its own, right? So please email your PowerPoint as soon as you can, you know, especially if you have your session this afternoon. Otherwise, your session, your presentation might not be in a laptop, okay? If you cannot do it, you can just bring it to the room, but then you need to do it way in advance because otherwise we cannot put it in there. So work with us, please. If we have the microphone in the room for those who wanted to ask questions here in the plenary. We'll go through that in a little while. You just, every time you want to say something, you need a microphone. Otherwise, the virtual participants would not hear you. Just keep that in mind. That's the map of the hotel. So you found us, so you trace back your step, you would be able to get to the courtyard suite, which are where the other 2 rooms are. They are marked in your program where those concurrent sessions are. You just have to go through this parking lot several times. There will be breaks that we set up in front of the courtyard rooms, so you can always go there and enjoy it. You don't need to be here. But again, everything would start right on time. There's a cocktail tonight for reception, which has some food. So therefore, you could, you know, stay around for that, and that will be at the brasserie. So just get familiar with the Congress, okay? And again, we like to thank our partners. They have been wonderful. You'll see them everywhere, and there might be some exhibition by some of them as well. So you would enjoy that for us. And we do have the International Organizing Committee who have been helping putting these together. Perhaps we can get them to stand up so that we can give them a big round of applause. The International Organizing Committee, you know who you are. Your name is on the screen and your body is in this room, I think. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Some of them are not able to join in person, of course, so they're joined virtually. We also have a lot of people helping with the Congress, and therefore, this is how it happened, right? Okay, that's the cue for the next plenary, right? So if you'd like to turn over now to the next plenary. Sorry, we are rushing a little bit, but again, if we don't start, we don't stop on time. The plenary is set up with you know, usually with 4 speakers and 2 discussants. So we're going to have a lot of time for discussion because the speakers are told not to speak too much. So we would be able to finish on time even though we are starting a bit late. So I would like to invite, well, Muniba Isaac is the chair of this session, and also Chehu Aquintela. So go ahead, please. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. If the speakers for the session could please join us. I promise you this would be the last that you see me for today. I know that you had quite a bit yesterday. So I would like to invite the speakers. We do also have online speakers. I just want to alert you that the screen in front is not working, if you can attend to that. So Leaders in Action Research is what our session is about. And when we think about doing work on small-scale fisheries, we think about how we do, what methodology we do, and how we relate to small-scale fisheries. And one of the key things for this particular session is what are the methodologies we use, because in small-scale fisheries it's not about small-scale fisheries. Action research means that we're working with small-scale fisheries. It is not going in to the community, get the information for a period of 3 weeks, you leave the community and you become the expert on that community. It is about you being committed to the community for the long haul. This is working with research, working with communities to understand their challenges and their processes. And I'm going to hand over to my co-chair, who will introduce the speakers and call on them to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Moniba, for the great work. Please let's give her a round of applause. Of course, the panel is being set, so I've just introduced them so that we familiarize more with their faces. Perhaps you know them by name. Now you know them by faces as well. Phil Imbata is the first person by my left here, please. Say hello.
Hi, everyone.
This is Phil Imbata. Carmen Manureno is the next. Manarino, sorry. So please. I have Aliou Sal. Then I have those who will be discussing the issue after the presentations by our speakers. I have Friday Njaya, and of course, Pratip Nayak. So, yes, Amadou is online, Amadou Tal. So, as we go on, we'll have his interventions. In order not to waste our time, let's start the ball rolling. Philip. Okay, do your slide.
Okay, all right. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to the organizing team for this pleasure to speak in this panel. My name is Pili Lembata, as introduced, from the University of Cape Town. And today I decided to reflect on the 14 years that I've been involved in action research, working within and working with small-scale fishing communities and wider coastal communities. When I was actually counting, I was stunned at how long I've been doing this research. I thought it would be much less than 14 years. So I thought this would be a good time for me to reflect. Sorry, I'm not used to working with mics, but I'm gonna try. Okay, sorry. Okay, so as I'm interested in working in small-scale fishing communities and with small-scale fishing communities, One of the lenses that I usually use is the wider coastal lens, because coastal fishing communities or small-scale fishing communities exist within wider context on the coast. And the coast is quite a useful lens to understand issues of equity, access, power, and inequality, which are rife in the global south when we're looking at the livelihoods of small-scale fishers. As an academic, a lot of my research focuses on the interface between the governance of the coast, including small-scale fisheries, as well as the livelihoods of small-scale fishers, and how governance influences and impacts the livelihoods of small-scale fishers. So that's what a lot of my participatory research or action research involves. And within that, I look at those issues that I've highlighted there. And as we all know, and has been also stated earlier on, coastal areas are sites of contestation between different sectors and actors, and also small-scale fishers are involved in the mix of that. And usually these contestations result in winners and losers. And usually small-scale fishing communities are the losers in a lot of the processes that happen related to governance on the coast. And these are some of the issues that I like to look at in my research, and also working with small-scale fishers to try and unpack that. Because in as much as I've been doing this work for more than 10 years, one of the things that I've realized is that a lot of the issues that small-scale fishers are currently facing have been issues that were still issues when I started out as a student. And it really frustrates me to see that not much is changing in terms of governance processes and practices, and in terms of the transformation of livelihoods of small-scale fishers. So that's why I find it very difficult to be apolitical about research in small-scale fisheries. And a lot of my work is activist and trying to figure out with coastal communities and with fishers how to navigate all these complexities. Sorry, I don't know why it's not moving. Okay. So just to start off, I want to highlight or reflect some of the trends that I've noticed in my work with small-scale fishing and on the coast. So one of the first things that I wanted to highlight is the fact that small-scale fishing communities are not homogeneous. And even when I use the word communities, I use it with a lot of caution, and highlighting the fact that, you know, the word community has been problematized a lot in the literature and in a lot of participatory research, because it sort of paints the picture or suggests that small-scale fishing communities and other groups are homogeneous, when there are a lot of contextual issues and nuances within them that need to be understood. So for example, if you look at the South African context, we have 4 coastal provinces. And if, for instance, you look at small-scale fisheries in KwaZulu-Natal compared to small-scale fisheries in the Western Cape, those contexts are very different. So if we try and adopt a one-size-fits-all approach to understanding small-scale fisheries, we are completely missing the mark. So I'm just using the word communities for a lack of a better word of grouping small-scale fishers together, but I wanted to highlight that this is something important that we need to bear in mind. And also what's important to note is that small-scale fisheries exist within wider socio-ecological, socio-economic, and socio-political contexts. I also struggle to look at small-scale fisheries as if they operate in a vacuum, because they are influenced by wider political, economic, and other processes that happen around them that in turn influence their rights and their ability to access resources. So this is something that has come up in a lot of my research and in the research of others that I work with, which I also want to highlight. And what has also come out a lot in my research is that small-scale fishers and coastal communities have a very unique understanding and interaction with the ocean and with marine resources that is not just informed by income or the need to put food on the table. A lot of the interactions that happen between fishers and their environments are actually informed by their customs and traditions and their local and indigenous knowledges and their identities. And this actually breaks the stereotype that we see a lot in the literature that assumes that small-scale fishers fish because they are poor or because they have no other alternatives for food. And this is a very minimalistic view of small-scale fishers. There are a lot of dynamic factors that influence why they fish. And also a lot of small-scale fishers see themselves as one with the environment. They don't see themselves as separate with the environment, which is why a lot of conservation rules and regulations that separate humans from the environment based on Western science are usually problematic within the context of small-scale fisheries. So that's something that I also wanted to highlight. And also small-scale fishers have been highlighted as defenders of the ocean in a lot of literature. And I've also been involved in some discussions with UNEP on small-scale fishers as ocean defenders. And this is something that is increasingly becoming recognized globally. And lastly, I wanted to highlight that from a lot of my research, the role of women is also coming out very strongly within the small-scale fisheries sector, as playing an important role in the livelihoods of small-scale fishers. And I think it was also mentioned a bit earlier that the role that women and even youth play in small-scale fisheries is not usually well recognized, but it's quite important. So without taking up too much time, I also just wanted to reflect on the SDGs, and I'm sure a lot of you can recognize these. We do live in the era of SDGs, and when oftentimes people speak about small-scale fisheries, they usually reflect on SDG 14. However, there has been recognition that SDG 14 is not the only SDG that's relevant to small-scale fisheries, and even life below water itself takes away from the focus on small-scale fisheries. As been pointed out by Sven Jentoft and others, that it's not just about life below water, it's also about what's happening above water, because that's where small-scale fishers are operating. And even it's not just about SDG 14, but if you look at the global south and the African context, small-scale fishers are affected by a lot of processes around them. Like I said earlier on, political, economic, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of marginalization, a lot of historical issues that influence why small-scale fishers are still struggling with the same issues now. So all those issues call for us to not only just focus on SDG 14, but to also look at the other SDGs that are relevant, like no poverty, no zero hunger. I don't know why my mouse is not working. Gender equality, as well as reduced inequalities. Climate action is also a big one. We have had COP quite recently, and also life on land and peace, justice and strong institutions. So just to highlight that these are some of the SDGs that we also need to link to small-scale fisheries within the African context, because of the more broader issues that affect small-scale fishers that transcend the small-scale fisheries sector itself. And in a lot of my participatory research, one of the things that I highlight in my research around small-scale fisheries governance and livelihoods are how history, access, and power are quite influential factors that actually influence how small-scale fisheries governance happens in the way that it affects the livelihoods of small-scale fishers. I mean, if you look at the African continent, most of our countries are post-colonial countries, and South Africa, we also have the added layer of apartheid. So those historical factors need to be highlighted, because a lot of the issues that small-scale fishers are facing now in terms of governance did not just emerge in the post-apartheid dispensation in South Africa. A lot of the governance regimes that were used in colonial times and in the apartheid era have perpetuated over to the democratic dispensation. And a lot of the insecurity in terms of rights, in terms of access, and other issues that small-scale fishers are struggling with have rolled over from these previous eras. So it will be amiss of us to look at small-scale fisheries governance by only focusing on what's happening now, without looking at the role that history and the role that power has influenced these things. So not to take up so much time, I just want to, I'm gonna skip some slides and just focus on the ones that I think are most important for today, and also just to give other speakers more time as well. Some of the more contemporary issues facing small-scale fisheries that I've highlighted in my research, as I've said, insecure rights and tenure. Climate change is increasingly being recognized as a key issue affecting small-scale fisheries. Centralized small-scale fisheries management in many parts of the global south, as well as marginalization and neoliberalization of marine and coastal resources. So for those of you who will attend our panel tomorrow with some of my colleagues, we will be talking about how blue economy activities and the expansion of blue economy activities in South Africa and in other parts of the continent are putting a strain on small-scale fisheries and their ability to harness their rights. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this. I just want to jump through. Sorry, the mass is a bit hard to work with. So in terms of methodologies in action research, as Moniba has mentioned, some of the work that I've been doing, I've been working in the same communities for over a long period of time, doing a lot of ethnography, participatory research, and a lot of the small-scale fishing communities that I've worked with are in rural areas. And, you know, these are not people that think like us as academics. You know, we always assume, we always take for granted as academics that you can just go in a room and start speaking to people about scientific concepts and so on and so forth, and people would just grasp them. When you work with small-scale fishers, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that it's not about your time as the researcher. You work with their time. If you really want to build the trust and actually engage with them and actually produce research that reflects what small-scale fishers are actually about. So these are just examples of methods that I'm not going to explain them. I think they're quite self-explanatory. But one of the things that I've been fascinated with as well is understanding the role of power in all of that. As I said, a lot of my research, I'm not a political theorist, but I've had to engage a lot with how politics and power influences governance that influences the livelihoods of small-scale fishers. And these are examples also of some of the projects that I've been involved in the past 10 years. And with some of my colleagues are in the room that I'm working with in some projects, such as the One Ocean Hub, which is quite a very amazing community of researchers that are actually passionate about action research, working with small-scale fishing communities in different parts of Africa and around the world. So that's the one project that I'm involved in now. And before, I've been involved in other projects. And more recently, last year, I also participated in the UNEP Environment Human Rights Defenders consultation, which was very powerful for me because I was able to hear from small-scale fishers from other parts of the world about the struggles that they encounter and also about the role that they are playing as ocean defenders, which I found quite powerful. So just in the interest of time, I have other slides and there's a whole lot more that I can say on this topic, but I think I'll just stop here and then allow my speakers more time as well. And then maybe in the discussion, if something comes up, I can speak to the other slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbata, for keeping it short. Alisa.
Good morning. May I start? Good morning. Before anything else, I would like to apologize for my colleague and friend, French-speaking colleague and friends, in particular, so those coming from Senegal. So my speech will be in English. Because since a couple of years, the main networks I'm working with are networks where English is used as working language. But luckily we have good translator. Today my intervention will be on research. To summarize, it's really questioning the way research is conducted based on two main objective observation that I share even with a couple of official, national, regional, and international fisheries bodies. Namely, I can, for example, mention regarding West Africa, the Sub-Regional Fisheries Committee, that is a platform which members are 6 countries since a while, maybe a couple of years. This sub-regional commission is more and more aware about the bad quality of data that are used in our fishery administration in order to set up management system that are supposed to ensure, to contribute to a good fisheries governance. Because governance has many components. For example, you have the way you must have a good statistic system with updated data. If you don't have it, you can't talk about good governance. And when you don't have this, you don't have a good governance, you can't even, maybe, I would say, you can't be willing to have a sustainable fisheries. So it's based on this situation, on these observations that I share with these regional fisheries bodies, with even a continental fisheries body or institutions that is the Bureau of Resource Animal of the African Union, have already noticed the fact that statistics are out of date in our countries. And it's very important to update this data. I can confirm that because I'm coming from Senegal, where we have very good and skilled experts, but for many reasons, our data are not updated. So the issue here is how, by setting up a good statistic system, we involve fish workers, fishers in the process. And by evolving the fishers, we can guarantee, we can improve governance and thus at the same time ensuring fisheries sustainability. Next page, please. But before anything else, I think it's very important to have a common understanding about the words. Because words, sharing the same understanding of words is very important when starting a sharing like that. For example, if I talk about how important it's to make, for example, fish workers, or fishers, I say, who used to be considered like, playing a single role of informant. How can they move? I will say even, must they move, their status from single informant, meaning object of study, towards science co-producer. But when I talk about science co-producer, I'm talking about, I would say, scientific document co-editing or co-author in synergy with scientists coming from, considered as being conventional scientists, meaning those who are trained in university and in scientific center. I think it's very important to clarify that because often when we talk about science, we have in mind the fact that only those who are trained in school, in university, in academic institution can be considered as scientists. Having a background of social anthropologist, I forgot to say that maybe it's, I have a perspective, some perspectives that might be different from as a scientist engaged in fisheries, like our colleague from who are biologists, economists, or those working specialized in ecology. But in our understanding, being a scientist is holding, how we say, knowledge, scientific knowledge. And in our experience, through this, through decades, for example, through these past decades, myself, having been engaged in research, I realized that some domain, some aspect, of marine science, I succeed in understanding this easier when it's explained by fishers than when it's explained by scientists coming from high, upgraded, for example, research center. I can give example. I'm talking about concrete, fact. I'm talking about experience. For example, if you consider the upwelling system, I'm from Senegal. Senegal is a country where we have good oceanographer, we have good, physicists. We say specialized in marine, for example, science. But for years and years, I couldn't have really a very simple way to make me understand how it functions, this upwelling. It's within a study I have been conducting for Sub-Regional Fisheries Commission that I met two fishermen specialized in small coastal pelagics. And they explained to me how it worked by just using the way the belt, when you go to the airport, this belt you have just, on which you put your luggage. How it was very simple with some drawing he made for me. I think this is a scientific knowledge because these people are interacting with the sea for years and years. And if they understand well how the upwelling is functioning, it's because they are specialized in a specific species that is Sardinella, and which species is very vulnerable and sensitive to the functioning of upwelling. So I think based on this this observation, it's okay, yes, c'est bon. So I think it's very important to know whether we must limit the informal role, I mean, the role of the fisher who detailed information. Is the information, the scientist, the one who by experience has amassed enough knowledge, or is the scientist coming a research center who just takes the information, succeed in putting it in a document to be published? Who is the scientist? The debate is over there. In our point of view, the one who is the source of the information must be considered as a scientist. Next, please. And from then on, we think that it's time to move to a, I would say, paradigm shift concerning the way research is conducted in our countries for many reasons. It's a top-down approach that don't take into account the priority of fishers. Secondly, given fishers' point of view, their preoccupations are not taken into account in the research program. The data from these are, for example, some reason, objective reason why, based on what we are experiencing in Senegal, for example, and in West Africa, data are updated. Yes, outdated. There are transaction costs, for example. Sometimes we have many researchers who say, okay, we have problem to update our data because it's costly, we don't have budget. The problem is not, it's a problem, but it's not the main problem. The main problem is the way research is conducted. It's costly, and costs can be minimized if, for example, we change the paradigm by involving fishers. Next is the fact that, for example, those who are living with the fish, daily speaking, must better the dynamic of fisheries than research center, because it's evolving very quickly and not in a linear way. So you need to have people, persons who are close to fisheries and who can collect on time information. So the utility, for example, in research is not recognized. It's not recognized by fishers, who are supposed to be the first beneficiaries of insight. So this requires a questioning of the paradigm. And when, for example, fishers who are supposed to use to value the scientist's insight, meaning, for example, how we say, moving towards implementation for some technical scientific advice. If it's not done, this can either lead to poor governance or contribute or reinforce poor governance, and thus question sustainability. Next, please, because I have 1 minute left. No? So in this context, we really appreciate an ongoing initiative we are engaged in with the municipality that my colleague Ablai over there knows so very well, because both we are from the same fishing community. And this year, the municipality team has invited some people of my generation, depending of their background, to join the municipality and for me, I was asked to chair the Fisheries Commission. And in my mandate, I had two main components. One, monitor the fishing activities and all other competing activities like this foreseen industry and all, monitor. Second is how to provide statistics data to the municipality. Next. And it's a very, very good opportunity, for example. It's a very good opportunity for any attempt to innovate in research. Last page, please.
Yes,
It's the last one.
Yes.
And now we have started, a survey. For the first year, it's on the fishery effort in the community, and then some other issues that are not taken into account by conventional scientific research related to health, security, family, life, all these cultural dimensions and social dimensions that are neglected in the favor of economy and biology. So this process is going, and we are opportunity to make it, to extend it, at the national level, because municipality, where fisheries are very important, consider this opportunity in order to make taxation. Once they know what's gravitating, around the activity of fish. The other opportunity is that the fishermen, for the other fishermen, is really the first time they are an opportunity to make research regarding issues that concern them directly. Thank you very much, and I apologize for taking too much time.
Actual research. So, yeah, yes. So, Kamal, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Moniba, for the invitation. But also, I have to say, it's a pleasure to be in a panel with researchers such as Pelile and Aliu, who I know personally, and I know the work that they do in support of fishing organizations and fishing communities. My name is Carmen Manarino. I'm the program manager at Masifundise. And what I want to talk about today is building a practice of participatory action research from the perspective of the grassroots. So I'm talking about building a practice because I think it's very much a work in progress for us as an organization, but also as we learn how to best do this in communities. So this will be reflections of the last few years working in the fishing sector and also trying to bring more of a research aspect into our work as well. So I'm not so sure how do I change that. Okay. Just to say about Masifundise, we are an organization that has been working with fishing communities since 2002, 2003 in South Africa. It was so great to see Judge Erasmus today, because indeed a lot of our work at the beginning has focused on having the rights of small-scale fishers recognized. And indeed, we have been working with focus on supporting organizing in fishing communities and movement building based on the idea that fishers have the power and have the necessity to speak for themselves. So we see our work in support of fishing communities instead of representing fishing communities. And our mission and vision is really built around the idea that fishing communities members, they are agents of change themselves, and they can engage and challenge decision-making processes that impact on their lives and livelihoods, and they have to be supported in doing so. As I said, a lot of our work in the first years has focused around policy development as an outcome of the judgment that and the court order on the Kenneth George case that was mentioned this morning. And yes, this is what we've been doing for many, many years, working around the policy development and implementation, focusing on bringing fishing communities in that process. But I think it's important to say also that out of that process, there has been a lot to be learned. And indeed, I think it's a work in progress when one wants to support fishing communities and understanding how to best to do so. So yes, this is where I think about 10 years into the development of the small-scale fishery policy, we realized that a lot of what was there in terms of the policy itself that was developed and the principles of those policies and the objectives, a lot wasn't being realized fully or as yet. And this was creating a big challenge in terms of the fishing communities. And especially, I think, in terms of the ability of fishing communities to remain engaged and mobilized in the process. So this is also where we saw a need of shifting gears and starting to look at how do we revitalize the social base in local fishing communities, and also focusing much more at the local level after many years of focusing on national level processes. And in this context, we saw participatory action research as a tool that could be useful for revitalization of fishing communities, activities, and empowerment, but also the need really to build a democratic process around knowledge making when it comes to fishing communities. So this is where we tried first time with the idea of community profiles. So we started working in a few different communities during 2017-2018 to build community-based plans around the implementation of the small-scale fishery policy. Through that process, we try to document and also reflect critically on the histories of fishing communities as they are. Indeed, Pilila, you were saying how we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's what we felt was happening with the implementation of the small-scale fishery policy in South Africa. So we tried to map the local histories, the interaction with natural resources, and also demographics and livelihood partners and tenure partners as well. So the goal here was to build some collective skills at community level, also to engage in some processes that are yet to come, like the co-management approach to the implementation of the small-scale fishery policy and fisheries management. And while this wasn't a perfect process, I think that what it was very useful for us and for the communities that we work with was to also broaden our scope in terms of understanding of what is needed when we talk about small-scale fishery in South Africa. So in other words, not being only looking at policy and policy implementation, but also having to look broader at issues of extractive developments like mining, and this was, for example, in the Northern Cape, Operation Pakis and the blue economy or ocean economy, and also the documentation of customary practice and systems. And I have to say that, yeah, when we started in 2017, 2018, we found some blockages, one being resources, but then of course, COVID-19 became a big stumbling block because for months, it was impossible to visit communities and work with them directly. And that had a big impact, I would say. So when we then were in this new phase, as COVID was unfolding from 2020, we also started thinking, okay, how do we continue to develop this practice from the community profiles, but then also looking at working conditions in small-scale fishing communities and how these are impacted by different factors. So this would be management systems, access and control of the natural resources, extractive development, as well as conservation. And also in this process, what we try to do is to use the small-scale fisheries guidelines as a tool for monitoring human rights in the context of small-scale fisheries. And ultimately, the goal was, of course, to take action and engage in governance processes at different levels and strengthen community-based organizing. And this is what I want to say also about how we see participatory action research. It needs to be political. I think, Pilila, you were saying that we cannot do action research and develop these practices and thinking that it can be apolitical. It needs to be political, and it's a political process in itself. But of course, I think it's important also to be realistic about the kind of challenges that we face when trying to implement these practices and do it in a political manner. I think Professor Yemtsov was talking about how in the last 10 years there has been such a growth of interest in research in small-scale fisheries. And indeed, I think that this is very positive and very important. But at the same time, when we look at many communities we work with, I think that we've been speaking about research fatigue and feeling that I think that a lot of fishers and fishing community feels that there is a lot of interest in their conditions from researchers. But while there is many researchers, and especially in South Africa, I think we are lucky to have such a strong research alliance that is working with fishing communities. At the same time, there is also a lot of extractive research that happens. People coming in communities, carrying out the research and then leaving and never to be seen again in the communities. So I think that when we talk about research, there is always a little bit of mistrust from communities and feeling that it's necessary to take the time to build trust in the process. And that is a challenge in itself. I also think that another challenge is the fact that when we talk about participatory action research, there isn't a size that fits all. So for all these sites that we've been engaging with and all the different communities that have been involved, it became very clear that we will have to develop a different plan for each one of them. We couldn't go with the same plan to all of them. Pilila, you spoke about the difference and also talking in coastal inland communities, different issues as well. So when we talk also about methodology, it's important to fit them into the specific needs, cultures, and community dynamics as well. I think that also plays an important role. And in building a collective practice, I think that one of the challenges, but I think it's more like in terms of the time that it requires, is that we don't, it's going beyond the point of contact and leadership. I think we have a lot of the great leaders of small-scale fishers here in South Africa, here in the room today, and it's important to acknowledge them. But I think that they will agree with me that when we engage at local level, it's also important to hear the broader community voice and see how different issues from different perspectives might be important, whether it's youth, women, fish processors, fishermen, marketers even. It's a broad picture that needs to be taken into account. And this all in all requires a deep commitment and strong practice that it cannot happen over a short period of time. So in this, I just want to highlight one case in particular, because it's a case that for us we are seeing as very successful. It's the case of Ibaniza. This is a fishing community on the west coast of South Africa, near the Olifants River mouth estuary. And we started with this process about 2 years ago. And we engaged with the communities to establish connections after COVID. In doing so, we tried to identify some priority issues, and we actually found out that some of the issues we thought were priorities, they weren't for the community there. So, for example, our entry point was mining. Thanks. But actually, other issues became more relevant and more important to be addressed immediately. Thanks. So I think that it's very interesting about this case for me is the fact that methodologies became, we were sort of coming in with the idea, okay, we will do some mapping, some histories, but the methodology became sort of secondary to the practice and the actions that was taken. So after the first 2-3 engagements that we had there, what was interesting is that the fishers themselves led us in thinking about the idea of having monthly meetings and having a constant engagement on a monthly basis where some issues will be discussed, actions will be taken, and then we will go back to the loop. So basically a participatory action research loop in its totality in that sense. Some of the issues that we looked at indeed were more around both permits and some certificates, so sea out safety. Also, the small-scale fishery policy implementation, which is still a work in progress here in South Africa. Importantly, community fishers also took this space to talk about community organizing and developing structures, and also the management of the Oliphant River estuary and how they would interact in that process. Mining threats are very real for the communities in, well, for Ibaniza and the other communities in the Upper West Coast. So that, of course, also came out, as well as harassment and criminalization of small-scale fishers. And so, just to conclude on this, I think that the achievements that we saw there over time was that there's been a strong revitalization of organization building, and fishers out of this process and out of this practice have been able to take some actions and be recognized in some of these government or governance bodies, like the Estuary Management Plan Forum. Also, I think that what was important for us as an output is to see that there's been collective organization building. So even with the implementation of the small-scale fishery policy and the process that is currently unfolding on that, fishers were helping each other in that process out of this organization, out of this monthly meeting. And also they strengthened the struggle against mining.
No, this one.
And importantly, we are seeing this process now building also in other communities where fishers have asked us to come in and help support the same sort of monthly process. And in that, I want to say that when we look at the participatory action research, what I think is, again, very important for us is to say that participatory action research needs to be a political process. It needs to empower the participants to develop their own action and their own analysis, and that's the key output. But at the same time, it's a practice that requires commitment. It cannot be something that is in a short period of time, and that's why I'm saying that to an audience of researchers mainly, because sometimes that can be a challenge. And it needs to align with the priorities that small-scale fishers have themselves rather than our own priorities. So yes, in that I want to say thank you and looking forward to discuss.
Thank you, Carmen. Now, the next speaker is Amadi Tol. Amadi Tol, are you there now?
Yes,
Okay.
good morning, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me for this to participate as a speaker for this very important gathering. And I congratulate the too big to be ignored 10th years anniversary for the good job done, and also the year for fisheries.
Can you turn the camera on, please? Thank you. Amadou, we just sharing your screen. You are
Yes, thank you.
still, okay,
Thank,
all right.
thank you so
may go
much.
ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. And I apologize not being with you because, as you know, I'm the coordinator of an EU funded program for the 15 countries of ECOWAS and Mauritania. And the thing is, before, the arrival of Dr. Sidibe for the first FAO program, the fisheries was not a priority on at ECOWAS. But with the work, both for FAO first and PESCAO, we managed, using the good job done by to be ignored, and FAO and AU-IBAR, we were really in a position to make sure that fisheries would be taken as a priority, and particularly the artisanal fisheries. So my presentation will be on enhancing the contribution of these small-scale fisheries to food security and nutrition in Africa. And I will, time to time, go down to my region, ECOWAS. So, of course, 400 million across the continent are being fed through the SSF, and which is really based on African traditions, identity in their economies. And they are, of course, under immense threat, marginalized, poorly planned, and underfunded, of course. And it represents 19% of protein consumed, provide, of course, vitamins, minerals, omega-3 fatty acids, and crucial in ending malnutrition. In West Africa, where I live and I work, 47% of fish caught in the region comes from the small-scale fisheries in general. Of course, if you take Senegal, Gambia, Mauritania, that's a higher. 1 million tons and generating more than 2 billion every year. And even though that the SSF in Africa is still low priority in national economies. So some characteristic, despite diversity of the SSF, there are some common characters. Micro, small capital-based enterprises, high percentage of the fleet or subsistence. You see it on the figure on the left. Something like 80% generally in different countries. I'm sorry, sometimes my internet connection is very unstable here where we are. Generally not regulated or protected by the state. Great diversity of fishing ecosystem practices, coral reef, mangrove, sandbanks, seagrass beds, while a few fishes reach deeper waters. According to FAO, 36% of which are considered mainly subsistent in nature, while another 35% engage in commercial fisheries, commercial activities. Further, about 13% are indigenous fishing, 9% recreational, and 7% in aquaculture. This gives an idea on the different type of fishing gears that we have. We have surrounding nets, which is the higher, followed by the gill nets, hooks and line, traps, cast net, and so on. The average million of tons, 12.4, 10 billions, but we are, as a continent, a net importer. And we are so sad that West Africa, despite all the very productive coastal marine zones we have, and the network of lakes, rivers, we are the most importing region in Africa. You can see that in the graph that we are the leaders in producing for the small-scale fisheries catches, and going down to South Africa with the last we are still lagging behind as West Africa. So this shows the numbers of fishes, and I will not go in details to that. Okay, the distribution, we have, let me just close it. We have 30% of the catches are sold in local markets, 26 outside, 29 is a household consumption, 30% fish meal. But unfortunately, the artisanal fish consumption going to the fish meal industry is improving, being bigger and bigger. So some livelihood and communities. We have Africa coastline, which is very big, 30,000 kilometers. We have 12 million people, 6.5 fishers, 4.9 processors, and less than 1% in aquaculture. So the total production, we said it. Lake Victoria, which is one of the largest lakes of the continent, produced 300 million. This is the statistic by the Lake Victoria Fisheries Organization. And the GDP of the SSF is less than 1% based on the work of AU IBAR in 2016. The importance of the food and trade source of essential protein, 400 million, I've told it. The per capita consumption is low based on the average consumption worldwide, which is close to 20. We have only 9.9 kilogram per person and per year. Small-scale fisheries in inland and marine areas play an important role in food security in various coastal communities. Affordable fish from the small-scale fisheries is a key component in fighting malnutrition, a problem that affects over 30% of the region's population. We have some subsidies. We have really only 2% of the subsidies in the world, which is not big. Mostly they are not harmful, generally subsidies. We are militating at ECOWAS and the other member countries of Africa to make sure that we keep some subsidies because they are not harmful to the good management of fisheries. We have now, like this is where I want to really to show the work that ECOWAS is doing. As I said at the beginning, we have two big projects. One is implemented by FAO, but funded by EU, and we have PESCAO that I'm coordinating. Our work, we focused on organizing the artisanal stakeholders. We have the One Safa, which is a platform of the people working in the fisheries and aquaculture. We have a regional One Safa, where we have all the 15 countries. And today, through our PESCAO program, we are working to have national platform of One Safa to make sure that the actors, they know, they understand what is happening. And if you see the governance, the governance mode in small-scale fisheries, we have self-governance 9%, and we have the co-management 33%, community-based management 24%, top-down hierarchical governance 34%. We wanted to have the small-scale fisheries having more responsibility, training them, organizing them, on based on what they want to make sure that it will go in the right way. I give some example of well-organized community ELA in Senegal. They do co-management, they have responsibility when the country is negotiating with EU, the fishing licenses, to make sure that it goes very well. We have the beach management unit in Tanzania, which is very good, helping countries and the small-scale fisheries to take its responsibility. So we have the different regulation measures to management of the fisheries licenses, And in this graph, you see the different areas where it is from licensing restriction, fishing effort, catch vessels, gears, and the development more and more of the marine protected areas or the MPAs, and the seasonal closure and open access under the PESCAO program. We convinced countries from Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Benin, Togo, and Nigeria to harmonize the days of the closing session to make sure seasons to make sure that one is not closing and the other is having its fisheries activities. Other form includes self-governing system where channel rights and granted by traditional authorities. The vulnerability, of course, rise of the sea level, climate sensitive diseases emanating and affecting the natural resources and its ecosystem, people and livelihood institutions. We have the vulnerability of the SSF across different value chain with cases of absolute and relative deprivation impacting livelihoods differently. Major challenges are overcapacity and overfishing. We introduced in the past the use of mothership. Yes, I'm just done. And the climate change consists of the exposure impacts, form adaptive capacity, migration can also jeopardize the co-management system. So in the policies and strategies, I will focus only on ECOWAS. We have developed a line, of course, with the policy framework and the reform strategy of the African Union, and we have the blue economy strategy of the African Union. And at ECOWAS level, we have the comprehensive fisheries strategy to have a sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development. And we have also the ECOWAS Blue Economy Strategic Framework, and you check those two strategies, the small-scale fisheries is the priority number one. So this is what we are doing at ECOWAS. We are pushing, and this is my last slide. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Again, sorry for not being with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a detailed presentation about small-scale fisheries in West Africa, around the ECOWAS regions, but also around other parts of the continent. I want to call up on our discussants to kind of give us a more in-depth response to your presentations. And I will call on Dr. Friday Njaya. He's also the head of fisheries in Malawi, a former alumni of the University of Western Cape. Friday.
Thank you very much, chairs, and good morning. I'm given only 3 minutes to summarize and give some thoughts and perspectives on what we have heard from the brilliant speakers this morning. I will start by appreciating the fact that participatory action research or action research is taking place within SSF, small-scale fisheries. I think we have to underscore that fact. Despite that, we have heard, I think since yesterday, where we went to Hutton Bay, talking about multiple problems, challenges, and even the speakers this morning and also the panel here. When you look at the fish, it's not the fish alone or the sector alone. There are linkages to so many sectors, which brings in another dimension. How do we resolve it? How do we solve the problems? It's complicated. If you take fish in terms of as a commodity, it's trade. If you take fish in terms of food security, agriculture is coming in. If you take about nutrition, health is coming in. So you can see so many sectors, even justice. I think we heard about judiciary this morning. All these other sectors. What happens upland affects the downstairs. Now, let me be specific to participatory action research. I think we have already been informed what the process is, but the central point is about the resource users themselves at the core of the process. When you look at the participatory research, action research, the resource users, the fishing committees, they're coming in as common dimension. You are looking at the planning, you identify the problems, of course, and you plan. After planning, you have to reflect and then go back to say, where are the gaps? All this I'm saying because sometimes action research may not have a time frame. It may be open-ended because we need to go back and identify the gaps. But apart from that, we have also to recognize and appreciate the role of local knowledge. Maybe you can reduce the amount of time you could do research by engaging the communities themselves. They know, they're experts. We talk about fish in terms of catch. People and sea, they always interact. But if you can go in as experts on our own without engaging the communities, local knowledge can be a problem. I will look at, I'll end up my talk by looking at blue economy. I think we have heard it's a threat to small-scale fisheries. But are we generalizing it? Are there any specific areas we can look at? In what context? Is it because of poor planning? What is that we can talk about blue economy? It can be a threat, it could be a positive. Maybe this is now the time we can explore from yourself and how your perspectives could be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Friday. Also, Professor Prateep Nayak, who was leading the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership, and he's also a partner of this Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Muniba, and thank you, Akintola, and thanks for the invitation. I know I have 3 minutes, so what I will do is I would do a high-level summary of what we just heard from our 4 leaders in action research. We heard that these are all 4 leaders, and then they were reflecting on the work they have been doing in the small-scale fisheries space and their experience in terms of what good action research mean and what are some of the key characteristics of action research that we can learn from. And I'm not going to go to refer to each one of them, but I will just do a summary. What we heard is that action research really depends on defining the lens. The better the lens, it can enable finding out all the invisibilities and all the visibilities, of small-scale fisheries. Because we know that is small-scale fisheries is replete with, multiple dynamics, multiple complexities, multiple issues. And we heard that, it has equity issues involved in it, power dynamics involved in it. It has, inequalities involved in it. So to be better, able to capture all of that in a meaningful way, we need the right lens. And action research is something that would lead to, defining this lens to find out all of this. Therefore, action can take. We also heard that small-scale fisheries has many characteristics. Of course, I talked about a number of them. These characteristics represents the complexities and the system's nature of small-scale fisheries. And therefore, action research is something that engages us in terms of engaging in the typical characteristics of the small-scale fisheries to do better. We need to look at history and the power dynamics. We need to look back. We need to look to the future. So we need to be forward-looking, but also not at the cost of missing out on the past. So therefore, the emphasis through action research on the importance of history, power, and the processes and the dynamics and the structures related to those things. We also heard about the methodological aspects of action research. And to make it very specific, one of the speakers also mentioned that action research must lead to practice. And unless it leads to practice, it's a very horizontal room, so I don't know when my attention goes to this side and I forget the other side. So action research is grassroots practice. That's what we heard about. And the speaker also kind of tried to capture it by extending the action research into participatory action research, which means you do it in a way that there is no one leader, there is no one group that is involved in this kind of research, but it is participatory. There is lots of co-production and co-creation of various things that is going on within the small-scale fisheries domain. What I want to conclude by saying is that my own experience of the work that we do at Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership. If we look at why do we call it vulnerability to viability, in the small-scale fisheries domain, not at any given point in time, we're going to see that small-scale fisheries are going to be either completely vulnerable or completely viable. So it's a continuum. So we look at various things that make it vulnerable, various things that can make it viable. Therefore, it's a continuum. It's a process. If we look at it as a process, I'll just finish in 30 seconds. You need to engage in that process of building viable, sustainable, resilient, and strong small-scale fisheries through long-term involvement. And long-term involvement can only come through action research. We want to engage in action research by linking action to research so that research does not become static. We also want to engage in action research because we want to see that research is leading to action. At the same time, action is also leading to engaged research. So therefore, there are multiple dimensions of action research that connects us to small-scale fisheries. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Prateep. This is also an opportunity to market for your different sessions that will happen tomorrow. So Prateep's V2V is having 2 sessions tomorrow, so please come to the V2V sessions for Prateep. I'm going to have over to my co-chair, and I thought that we should also be able to kind of talk a little bit about the World Cup. The World Cup is happening. Who's representing Africa? Sadio Mane is not part of the World Cup, but I guess he was sent here to do action research. So this is your opportunity now to ask questions. I would urge that we need to let fishers speak. We also need to let women speak. And we also need to be inclusive as possible. Thank you very much.
Yes, we've listened to these brilliant presentations, and as stakeholders too, there are some of the thoughts that have been shared that may be similar to your experience, or you still have 1 or 2 other interventions to make. So we start it's time for you to ask questions. Who wants to start? Okay, okay, there's a question, okay. Now, okay, just identify your name and then okay. No, somebody is already. The name, please. You can come up to the.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Leopold. I have one question for Carmen. You start your presentation explaining that your work was initially focused on national issues on small-scale fisheries in South Africa, and then you move on to grassroots research as to come close to communities. And then in your last slide, we saw that there was another move to have connections between those communities. So my question would be how you see your approach on participatory action research able to upscale your results, your outputs on that sector, so you can really address maybe some of the issues that come from national factors or external drivers. Thanks.
Okay, comment? Yes. Short, please.
Yes, I think that for us it's been very interesting. I have to add maybe that we've been working for 20 years in fishing communities across South Africa. So those relationships were there for a long time. But I think that what was an added value of doing participatory action research in one specific community, or in a few specific communities, was to go deeper that we were able to do, being a small organization with only 10 program members. So I think that was why it's so important and interesting to see how this deep practice in one community produces results in other communities as well. So adjacent communities, villages that are in short distance, they start hearing about this practice that we were developing, and they became more and more interested, to the point that now we have started doing the same nearby. I think that one of the challenges in terms of scale, it's the fact that this is a human intense work. It requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of long-term commitment. So we are hoping to see this practice develop to other communities, but what we are also hoping to see in terms of actions and organization building is also that it's not relying on the outsiders. So it's a practice that builds itself, and it becomes sustainable, for a lack of better word, in terms of communities leading it themselves. So even now in Libanese, we are often not able to make the monthly meeting for one reason or the other, but it continues, it goes on, and that's, I think, the output that we would like to see more and more of over time.
Okay, thank you. Professor Ratana, we take the online intervention. There's somebody online who wants to ask the question. I sent in a question. Please, ma'am.
Very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, this might work now. Does it work?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Okay. Just feel like I want to switch to this side of the room because the Congress, right? The plenary has two sides, huh? So look at us as well as you speak. Now, this question, I'm not sure who's it addressed to, because it's a bit broad and it's about the small-scale fisheries guidelines. So even if the panel cannot answer now, it is something for us to consider as we are talking about this. So the question came from Jubril Karim, basically saying that small-scale fisheries are gaining traction and they should get the required attention. The question is the legal framework, whether there are existing legal frameworks in the jurisdiction of the country, whether they are effective and could be used as a foundation to help implement the guidelines. So what are the legal status of the small-scale fisheries guidelines in a country, and what countries is doing to put that into force? Thank you.
Okay, so that's a question, maybe the next section on efforts to implement the SSF guidelines across the region. That will be one of the questions that will be very important that time. Now, okay. Okay, please come to the.
Right, good morning. My name's Aliou Sow. I am from the Gambia in West Africa, a member of the World Fisher Forum on Fish Harvesters, WFF, and a member of the African Advisory Group on the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. My question goes to my brother and namesake, Aliou Sall of Senegal, regarding the issue of research, knowing very well that the impact of climate change on small-scale fisheries is growing day in, day out, and knowing very well that our indigenous fish species are also in the disappearance, especially for those of us around the Atlantic Ocean, and also realizing some of the fisheries products in the inland sector are disappearing. So the impact of fisheries, climate change on the small-scale fisheries in terms of production, in terms of type of fish that used to be available, disappearing now. What is the situation, or what is your research content in order to help small-scale fishers alleviate this, I refer to as a pandemic? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Aliou. Okay. Just use the mic. Yes. I think, due to the, limited time we have, I didn't go in detail, regarding the,
You have the opportunity now.
Yes.
You have the opportunity.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But climate change is part, as a topic, is part of the research topic. Is part of our agenda, and in particular concerning the Sardinella representing at least around 80% of species landed in Senegal. And given, if scientific information we have from those who are specialized in climate, the connection between climate and fisheries, Sardinella is one of the most vulnerable species to the climate change. So it's one of the priority of these fishes. It's a part of the, topic that is in the agenda. And even in the first year, the main two activities we have concerned this, the impact of climate change from fishers' perspective themselves. They're going to collect themselves the data, and it's from then on that we can experiment what we mean by transdisciplinary approach, because data has to be processed through a collaboration with statisticians that might come either from the National Agency of Statistics or from the Fisheries Research Center. This is to be negotiated later, but it's a part of our plan of research.
Okay. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry, but my intervention is in French. Bonjour. Donc, nous, avec la recherche, on a des préoccupations qui sont plus ou moins différentes. Tandis que la recherche s'occupe au Sénégal à faire donc des publications. Nous, ce qui nous intéresserait, c'est une recherche action tout de suite. Par exemple, si les sardinelles, donc je disais qu'on a des préoccupations différentes entre la recherche et nous les pêcheurs.
We have different concerns between those and researchers and that of fisher folks.
Si nous pêcheurs, nous voulons des résultats tout de suite, par exemple, les sardinelles commencent à devenir rares. Qu'est-ce qui fait que ces sardinelles sont rares? Quelles sont les actions à mener tout de suite pour les faire revenir? Pendant ce temps, les chercheurs vont nous donner des résultats 2 ans après. Au Sénégal, les publications se font 2 ans après.
As fisher folk, we want immediate results. For instance, we want to know immediately why sardinellas are disappearing and becoming so rare. And very often researchers have a timing and a temporality that is different from ours. In Senegal, reports are being published 2 years after the fact, but we need action, immediate action and immediate responses.
C'est pourquoi nous voulons que la recherche soit beaucoup plus proche de nous. Juste un exemple, la JICA travaille avec nous sur les plages pour ouvrir, par exemple, le ventre des poulpes pour nous dire, voilà, c'est ça un poulpe mâle, voilà, c'est ça une poulpe femelle. C'est cette période-là que les poulpes pondent des œufs. C'est pourquoi maintenant au Sénégal, tous les mois de septembre et octobre, en un mois, les pêcheurs savent quelle est la biologie des poulpes et arrivent à les préserver. C'est pourquoi j'appuie beaucoup l'approche de Aliou Sall pour que la recherche vienne tout près des pêcheurs et développer des actions.
For instance, in Senegal, we've worked together with the JICA, and we've been working with them particularly on the question of octopus. They've opened the bellies of octopus to look at the reason and the diseases that they're confronted to in order to understand the impact and to look for solution, which is why I very much support the approach proposed by Mr. Aliou Sall in terms of participatory research in accordance with the needs of the fisher folk specifically.
Okay,
Small-scale fisher folk.
Thank you, thank you. So questions, please. Let's leave the comment to, we can always make the speakers and continue the exchange. One more question this side, and we want a female participation. Okay, I think somebody, yes. Sorry, I'll come to you. This is everybody Congress.
Thank you. My name is Tetsu Sato from Japan, Ehime University, and I've been working with Lake Malawi, thank you. Lake Malawi fisheries, and I have a very strong impression from these brilliant talks that this participatory action research is very dynamic process, very dynamic and continuously changing. And of course, there is always a risk that the direction may be divert from sustainable direction, but rather going to different ways. And I really want to ask the presentators idea or experience how you manage to navigate the action research processes toward more sustainable direction. That is my relatively general question, but if you have any impression or ideas, please let me know.
Okay, any person in mind?
Anybody.
I think we can ask the panelists to respond, and also we should not forget Amadou online.
Okay.
Thank you.
So who is responding? Any?
Pelele?
I can give it a go. If I understood your question correctly, you're asking about how do we ensure that participatory research is relevant from a sustainability perspective, and how do we navigate that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I think as I mentioned in my talk, and as Carmen also highlighted in the others, participatory action research is really, it's very challenging, especially, I mean, I'll speak, I'm an academic, and you know, I have to make time to engage in participatory research, unlike my colleague Carmen, who works in an NGO. And it's really challenging in the sense that one has to always keep abreast in terms of what's happening in small-scale fishing communities, and also try to understand as far as possible the issues from the views of the small-scale fishers. So I think that's the best way, if I could answer your question, is to always approach everything from the lens of small-scale fishers, because even as academics, you know, we gain some certain expertise from the work that we do, but we cannot rely on that if we want to sort of do participatory research that can actually respond to the needs of communities. So it's always about keeping abreast in terms of what's happening in the communities, and also engaging with issues as defined by the small-scale fishers themselves, not as defined by our own agendas or our funding and so on and so forth. So I think that's the best way that I could answer your question. I don't know.
Can you please repeat, because of the mask, I didn't hear well, you know. Can you repeat this question?
No, the question is, how do you make action research sustainable?
No, the first question should be how you know we would like to implement, you know, participatory research, because it has become how we say, this term have been used abusively, because we talk about participatory approach everywhere. What does it mean? We have to be sure that it's a participatory, but it has to be ensured at different level. The way people behavior, for example, in the community, it can change, for example, by the relationship can change in a way that it can improve, for example, the research process, The tool you're using, for example, in order to disseminate research, if it's only, for example, in the language that conventional scientists were trained, meaning for Senegal, for example, you have to, because you have your PhD or you are professor, you have to speak good and scientific, French and all. So it's a limitation, for example, for any will to promote, the participation, of fishers in research. Someone must imagine, and know whether there are other, for example, means to communicate research. We have other. We have video, for example, audio video. Fishers can invest him or herself, for example, in a very sophisticated or interesting topic like the biology and the ecology of some main, for example, species caught in our country, for example, in our ocean. You have people who hold deep knowledge on that. But if you are expecting them to communicate this knowledge in a very conservative way, meaning in French and PowerPoint and all, it doesn't work. But people can speak Wolof, can speak their own language. And it's a very important to mention the fact that there is a very big mistake people are making when they use the term literate. This one is not literate. This one is literate because he's an African bird, he master French, he master English, he has PhD. But in my country, for example, Senegal, 80% of the population are Muslim. But you don't see that because we are living in a very nice cohabitation, But among these 80% who are Muslim, at least 60 or 70% write by using Arabic alphabet. So either you can make research and communicate your insight through, audio, video, either you can. During all the time I was, in Europe for my studies, my father wrote to me, in Wolof by using, for example, Arabic alphabet, because when you are Muslim, you are supposed to use it. Anyway, just in order, if you want to sustain it, you have to use, these kind of tools that people are used to, and they are using in daily life.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Do
you.
you want to make a very short?
Yes. First off, hello. There are noises. Okay. First of all, the action research should be focused on why we close season, why we reduce the fishing effort, why we are going to regulating the open access, quota, selective gears, improved landing site, registration of boats, using posters, like said Mr. Rightly Aliou Sall, which are language independent. And the approach should be bottom top. So capacity building for the non-state actors, the small-scale fishery communities, to make sure that they can have the bargaining power, they understand what is behind, and we do the ecosystem approach to fisheries. Thank you so much. You got me?
Okay. So the lady, please.
Yes.
The name and where you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Corinne. So my question is for all of you. Now, the investiture promote OPR. It's an ocean pasture restoration, consists of pouring or aging iron particles in the ocean to stimulate primary production. So how do you think about OPR? It's a solution to face overfishing?
Is the question to whom?
I'm sorry, we didn't quite clearly understand the question.
Please just ask the question more clearly.
Can you just maybe just be a little bit more clearly?
Yeah.
We couldn't hear well, yeah.
Okay, so today the investisseur promote OPR. OPR is about ocean pasture restoration. So it consists of pouring or adding iron particle in the ocean to stimulate the primary production. I think that it seems like this technique has been tested in Canada and Chile. So my question, how do you think about OPR? It's a solution to face overfishing?
Any of the.
Maybe we could ask Carmen to answer if.
Yes, I mean, I'm not so sure I have the informations to answer about this particular strategy being used in Canada and Chile around overfishing. But an answer that I will give about something that I don't know is, and in the context of what we're discussing here, is that especially when we look at overfishing and also in connection to what was asked before about sustainability of fishing practices and how participatory action research contributes to that, I think that our position would always be that whatever mechanism or technology or strategies used, it's always going to produce better results if fishers and their communities are involved in designing those strategies and implementing those technical solutions. I'm not so sure about the particular project, but I would say in terms of practices and approaches, for sure that will make it much more successful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. At this end, I think it's time to round up. As we round up, let's give our panelists a round of applause.
And also much thanks to the chairs of the session, Quintula and Moniba. Thank you very much. Okay, so we get through one plenary. We're just gonna go to lunch. You only have about an hour and 15 minutes. So please get back here at 1:15 to start the second plenary. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.